I was just saying, I want to especially thank the members who are new to our committee. You're very welcome. And as always, I should start by thanking the Secretariat staff for your hard work in organizing our meeting today. In the interest of time, I will not repeat all of the technical announcements. We will be following the same procedure as in our meetings earlier today. However, I will note that due to today's decision to convene a special reinforced meeting of the Permanent Council, interpretation will unfortunately no longer be available. Our meeting today is limited to a total of 2 hours. As is our tradition, we've invited several speakers from the OSCE government side to update us on their work. We will then hear from the committee rapporteur with a preview of his annual session report to be delivered in July. We will then engage in open debate. With this short amount of time and so much for us to discuss, we will need to be disciplined in the procedures we follow. First, following the instructions sent to all delegations on February 15th, the list of those wishing to take the floor in the general debate was formally closed yesterday. Our list of members seeking the floor during the debate already has 22 names on it. That said, I know some colleagues may wish to add their names to the list should time allow. If that's the case, I encourage members to register their interest through the chat function. And if time allows, we will try to add them at the end of the list that we already have. In any case, the list of speakers will be completely closed 30 minutes after the moment I bang the gavel for this meeting. Second is time limits. As always, I want to maximize opportunities for everyone who wants to speak to have a chance to do so. In order to accomplish that, we'll need to try to keep our interventions to a maximum of 2 minutes. Please watch the timer on the screen and respect your colleagues and stick to that 2 minutes. We now move to item 1, adoption of the agenda. Dear colleagues, I call the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security to order. Our first order of business is adopt the agenda for today's meeting. The agenda was distributed to delegates on February 9th. The Secretariat has not received any comments on the agenda since that time, so I'll assume there are no objections to its adoption. Seeing not, the agenda is adopted. We'll now move into my opening remarks. I want to thank you, colleagues, for being with us here today, and it's certainly refreshing to be in person for those of us who were able to do that. In preparing my remarks for you today, it's been very difficult and more difficult than for any previous meeting. Rather than entering into the substantive debate myself, I've always pledged to the committee that my main priority as chairman is to ensure that as many of you as possible are able to engage in meaningful dialogue. I made this my priority precisely because I value this form of dialogue so highly. And sometimes especially with viewpoints that I might personally disagree with, I think it's still my role as chair to preserve your right to express those. However, it is also true that this dialogue, which our institution enables, has always derived its greatest value from the fact that it's based on a common starting point, a set of principles forged over years of discussions and consummated in the Helsinki in 1975 by leaders who demonstrated remarkable foresight and far-reaching wisdom. These are the principles reaffirmed on many occasions since 1975 by our governments, to which we have always sought to hold ourselves and each other to account. They're the shared basis on which we can evaluate our progress towards making our region more peaceful, prosperous, and secure, one for all of our citizens. Colleagues, as the collective guardians of these principles, we cannot ignore the evidence before us. Fundamental underpinning of our security order, including commitments to respect other countries' territorial integrity, sovereignty, and choice of security alliances, are at this moment being breached flagrantly and deliberately by one of our participating states, which is, as we speak, conducting an unprovoked invasion of another participating state. As your chairman, I want to share with you my sincere and abiding belief that in this time of deep crisis in the OSCE region, with likely consequences for the security of generations of the citizens we all represent, that there is still a role for dialogue in this organization. And this committee was created to foster it. Our committee's focus on the politico-military aspects of security and principles guiding relations among participating states could not be more relevant to the questions before us. Indeed, in our session today, we will first hear from distinguished senior representatives from the governmental side of the OSCE before engaging in our special debate. Colleagues, this moment of crisis demands our engagement and exchange of views. We need to make sure each and every delegation representative of the Assembly fully understands what is at stake, as well as what can be lost. And I'm confident that all delegations will keep firmly in mind as they consider the current moment those commitments all of our nations have pledged to uphold, first and foremost, those contained in the Helsinki Final Act. Colleagues, I believe our Assembly has never had a more important role to play than we do today. This is especially true of the committee I have the honor to lead, along with our Vice Chair, Kostel Dunava, and our Rapporteur, Lorenas Kashunas, who will, I'm sure, do a tremendous job in capturing the essence of the challenges before us and factor what he hears in our discussion today into the report that he will prepare for our committee's meeting at the annual session this summer. I'm grateful for your support and hope I can count on all delegations to meet the gravity of the moment through the tools we have established together to make our unique contributions as parliamentarians. Colleagues, those are my opening remarks. Let's now proceed to item 3 on our agenda. I apologize for the delay. I've been given an update that 2 of our speakers, one is not available, Ambassador Tuula Urila, and also Ambassador Jocelyn Kinnear is being delayed by the meeting downstairs. And so we will move directly into presentation from Ambassador Ravshan Sadabila, Chairperson of the Forum for Security, Cooperation and Permanent Representative of Azerbaijan to the OSCE.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There you are, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you. Mr. President, distinguished members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience in my capacity as the chair of the Forum for Security Cooperation. I would like to present the priorities of Azerbaijan's chairmanship within the FSC in the first trimester. Azerbaijan has assumed the chairmanship of the Forum for Security Cooperation for the period between January and April 2022. On 19 January, Foreign Minister of Azerbaijan, His Excellency Mr. Ceyhun Bayramov, inaugurated the chairmanship of Azerbaijan and presented our main objectives and priorities. Today, I would like to recap and convey this vision. FSC is one of the key pillars of the OSCE, focusing on political military dimension, which does not exist in a vacuum, but rather reflects a broader political military context. Unconditional respect for fundamental norms, principles, and commitments enshrined in the core OSCE documents, starting from the Helsinki Final Act, in particular respect for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of internationally recognized borders of states, remains the basis for our cooperation both within the OSCE as a whole and the FSC in particular. Thus, our cross-cutting priority during FSC chairmanship is to uphold and strengthen compliance with fundamental OSCE principles, along with enhancing implementation in good faith of political military commitments. We are convinced that only such an approach could restore trust and confidence, reinvigorate the application of political military instruments, enhance predictability and transparency, avoid threat multiplication efforts and aggravation of these perceptions, and by so doing underpin peace and stability in the OSCE region. To contribute to these goals and reflect on the up-to-date security challenges in the OSCE region, we designed our chairmanship program in a balanced way, putting on the agenda those traditional topics of the forum along with relatively new ones. So far, we held 5 security dialogues on the topics of international humanitarian law, mine action, small arms and light weapons, and stockpiles of conventional ammunition, the role of non-aligned countries in European security architecture, and counterterrorism. Moreover, to stimulate deeper discussions on some aspects of humanitarian mine action, we organized a dedicated side event at the Austrian National Defense Academy. Azerbaijan attaches particular importance to the role and place of non-aligned countries in the European security architecture. To this end, we pioneered this topic within the FSC, which triggered insightful and timely discussions as currently a unique asset of our organization. The indivisibility of security underpinned in foundational OSCE documents is under threat. Furthermore, an important historic milestone, the Millennium FSC meeting, has fallen onto our tenure. With a view to commemorate this symbolic occasion, we raised a separate agenda item on the issue, stimulating discussions on the historic development of the forum and its contribution to security and stability in the OSCE region. In the coming weeks, Azerbaijan will arrange 3 more security dialogues. One of them will be held in the framework of joint meeting of the Permanent Council and FSC. So this topic will be the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. We intend to use this joint meeting as an opportunity to promote the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1325 and follow up resolutions on women, peace, and security in all their aspects. Another security dialogue will cover the issue of conventional arms control and confidence and security building measures. We are convinced that the implementation of arms control and CSBM's commitments under existing regimes, both in letter and spirit, could provide a significant contribution to peace, security, and stability in the OSCE region. At the same time, the primary purpose of these regimes should be to sustain peace and stability, giving effect and expression to our shared foundational principles and commitments laid down first and foremost in the Helsinki Final Act. Our final security dialogue will be dedicated to post-conflict rehabilitation and will draw on the lessons and experiences across the OSCE region. The OSCE's conflict cycle toolbox provides a basis for the organization's engagement in post-conflict rehabilitation activities in a comprehensive manner, extending inter alia to the FSC's area of work. There is a necessity to further develop and ensure dialogue of the OSCE's capabilities at the post-conflict rehabilitation phase. Let me conclude by stressing that the FSC chairmanship of Azerbaijan continues to exert efforts to ensure that the forum serves effectively as a key platform leading the OSCE's work in the political military dimension. We are looking forward to continue working with other participating states in order to contribute to security and stability in the OSCE region through implementation of political military commitments in support to ensuring respect for foundational principles that our organization rests on. We would like to thank the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly for its keen interest in the political military aspects of security, which is also reflected in the resolution adopted by the Assembly in previous year. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us today and sharing your priorities with us. I should have mentioned at the offset that that Azerbaijan this year took over chairmanship of the FSC, and we certainly look forward to working with you going forward. I had the pleasure of addressing the FSC March 21st of last year, and look forward to working very closely with you going forward. So thank you for that. Next on the agenda is Ambassador Kairat Abdurmanov, our OSCE High Commissioner on National Minorities. Ambassador, thank you for being here with us again to describe your work on the prevention of conflicts and tensions involving national minorities. The floor is yours, sir.
Distinguished Congressman and Chair Richard Hudson, distinguished members and observers of the Parliamentary Assembly, dear colleagues and friends. It's an honor for me to be with you all today and to have opportunity to address you in my present capacity. I've served as High Commissioner for over a year now, and this is my second time addressing the Parliament Assembly. This year is a very special year for me and for my institution as a whole, as the mandate of the High Commissioner on National Minority was agreed upon in Helsinki exactly 30 years ago. Since then, the guiding pillar of the High Commissioner's work in the OSCE region has been to provide early warning and early action to prevent ethnic tensions from developing into a full-scale conflict. To fulfill their conflict prevention mandate, each successive High Commissioners have assisted the OSCE participating states with developing and implementing policies that facilitate the integration of diverse societies. It is an undeniable fact that with each passing decade, diversity in our respective societies is increasing. This calls for effective and sustainable policies that facilitate integration. How states choose to manage diversity may vary, but the goal is the same: to strengthen society from within. I'm convinced that the systematic management of integration of diverse groups of people in a society is the key to ensuring security in the OSCE region. Since taking up my mandate in December 2020, I've had the opportunity to engage with a broad number of participating states. Thus far, I've undertaken more than 24 visits to various destinations all over the OSCE area, including to Ukraine and the Russian Federation. During these visits and in all my conversations with interlocutors, I always emphasize the importance of fostering a constructive dialogue, sharing best practices, and depoliticizing and de-escalating matters related to national minorities. I'm encouraged by the willingness and openness of governments and especially parliamentarians to engage with me. When needed and requested, I also offer my support to participating states on shaping policies that promote integrated and cohesive societies as a means of long-term conflict prevention. In my daily work, I focus on short-term projects aimed at reducing tensions and providing guidance to promote integration of diverse societies. My mandate allows me to work in strict confidence and to act independently, which in turn ensures freedom, flexibility, and foster trust in the integrity of the process from all sides. My normative toolbox consists of international standards such as the Copenhagen document, Council of Europe's Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, as well as the 9 thematic recommendations and guidelines published so far by my distinguished predecessors. These HCNM guidelines and recommendations relate to a wide range of issues that affect national minorities, including education, language, participation in public life, media, policing in multi-ethnic societies, access to justice and national minorities, and the media in digital era. One such set of recommendations, namely the Ljubljana Guidelines on Integration of Diverse Societies, will celebrate its 10th anniversary this year. My office always marking such milestones with anniversary events as a means to foster dialogue, exchange ideas on how a specific issue affects minorities, and share best practices within OSCE and beyond. This year, we look forward to concluding our research into the socio-economic participation of minorities, including women. Our findings on this important issue will serve as the basis for the 10th set of thematic recommendations, which my office will seek to publish in the near future. Later this year, we also plan to hold the Max van der Stoel Award ceremony in The Hague. This award was established 20 years ago by the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs in honor of the late Max van der Stoel, a prominent Dutch statesman, and the OSCE's first High Commissioner on National Minorities. It's given every 2 years to a person, group, or institution for extraordinary and outstanding achievements in improving the position of national minorities in the OSCE participating states. In the call for nomination, which was published earlier this month, I invited nominations for candidates worthy of recognition for consideration by international jury of Max van der Stoel Award. As the chair of the jury, I therefore encourage all of you to submit your nominations in the coming weeks so that I, along with other members of the esteemed jury, can give them due consideration and select the winner. So submission should be done via channels of your missions to the OSCE. I want to emphasize that managing diverse societies does not stop at creating legal and institutional frameworks. It's also about the systematic management of policies and programs that encourage the participation and representation of persons belonging to national minorities in public life, with a view to increasing their socioeconomic and educational opportunities. I also believe that during this process, particular attention should be paid to engaging with youth and women, and to highlight the gender-related issues and to design programs for them and with them. Distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, cooperation with the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly is very important for the effective execution of my mandate. This is why I'm especially keen on meeting parliamentarians during my country visits, and going forward, I will continue to proactively reach out to members of national parliaments. At the onset of the first meeting of the OSCE Permanent Council this year, the chairman in office, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, Honorable Zbigniew Rau, said, "The strength of the OSCE lies in its potential. Its effectiveness is a function of the readiness to implement its legacy, enabling engagement in the area of conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and post-conflict rehabilitation." End of quote. Indeed, conflict resolution is contingent on the willingness of parties to come together and to cooperate. And in this regard, a number of participating states in the Permanent Council continue to refer to Astana Commemorative Declaration of 2010, a declaration which was adopted in my capital when the OSCE family displayed unity and shared commitment to uphold the vision of free, democratic, common, and indivisible Euro-Atlantic and Eurasian security stretching from Vancouver to Vladivostok, rooted in agreed principles, shared commitments, and common goals. I have nothing to add to this conviction of our heads of state and government. More than a decade has passed since then, and today we are facing new but not uncommon challenges. This is why it is important for us to reinforce our efforts to build trust and renew dialogue between and within 57 participating states. And in this effort, I look forward to working together to build a stronger OSCE for the people we serve, which all of you, distinguished parliamentarians, represent today. I thank you for your kind attention.
Well, thank you, Ambassador, and we certainly appreciate your emphasis on engaging with parliamentarians, and we stand ready to engage with you. So thank you for the time today. Colleagues, when Ambassador Kinnear arrives, we will allow her to make her presentation, but I think we'll continue to move forward on our agenda. We'll go to item number 7, which is the presentation by Mr. Laurenus Kashunas, the rapporteur of the First Committee, on his ideas and intentions regarding his report for the annual session. So to introduce our parliamentary debate, I'd like to now give the floor to our committee's rapporteur, my friend, Laurenus Kashunas. Dear Laurenus, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much for your chairmanship of the committee. You know, I will be open with you. I'm just now sitting in my parliament because we have extraordinary session, and first of all, because what's happening now in Ukraine, it's very hard to be rapporteur during the time when one member of OSCE now directly attacks with military invasion another neighbor, its neighbor, and another OSCE country. So it's difficult to be diplomatic. It's difficult to find the words, and it's difficult not to talk from the heart. what's happening now today. We are talking a lot of about OSCE spirit and all OSCE mood, traditions, diplomacy, but we see the situation when the leader of one country, OSCE country, just one day ago declared what another country has no legitimacy to exist. What Ukrainian nation has no legitimacy to have its country, its state. So situation, I would say it's at least dangerous, but because it contradicts all principles of OSCE. What's happening and what Russia is doing now in Ukraine? I think the grand plan is to put the puppet government in Kiev. We're talking at the moment when Kiev is attacked. The capital, historical capital of Ukraine is attacked by Russians. Without reason, because of Ukrainians decided to live peacefully, to live independently, to live and just decided to go to the Western civilization, I would call so that. I mean, decided to join transatlantic security organizations, and this is the reason why they are attacked. And no, it's not a fear. It's not fear. So that's why my presentation, was different yesterday. I should rewrite it, change it today. And of course, we now live in an absolutely different reality. When diplomacy does not work, when international law does not work, it is rejected in brutal way. It is rejected. We are hearing about security guarantees for Kremlin, but what about security guarantees for Ukraine? What about security guarantees for our neighbors of Russia, for example, Georgia or Moldova? At the cusp of new Europe, ready to overcome decades of divisions, our predecessors agreed to a common security order built on Helsinki Final Act and the Charter of Paris. Yet today, the lack of commitment by Russia and lately also by Belarus, who joined in this aggression, Russia, we should also have it in mind. It is a lack of commitment to these ideals, open violation of them, of the main OSCE principles, also known as Helsinki Decalogue, as well as various OSCE commitments. Russian and Belarusian refusal to cooperate under Vienna document, risk reduction mechanism. Kremlin's attempts to destroy European security architecture means that mutual accusations and on the reliance on the use of force once again risk returning us to the adversary of long years through the past. So we have very different reality what we even had yesterday. And I would just use I will use just a chance here once again to stress our support to Ukraine, its independence, its unity, its sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its international recognized borders, and its right to freely choose its own security arrangements. Regretfully, what sequence of these recent diplomatic efforts to deter further Russian aggression against Ukraine has produced no breakthrough. And that's we have such kind of situation like today. And we talked really so long about that. It's like a deja vu feeling. All the decade we have this, we talked about imperialism, we talked about revisionism, we talked about where Russia, which does not comply to any international norms. And today we see the reality. And I should, I cannot be, in my head, in my heart, there's a, simple proposal to you to think really about and ask ourselves: does really Russia and Belarus, who also joined the aggressions against Ukraine, Russian aggression against Ukraine, to be a member of our family? Really, can these countries and delegations of these countries be members of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly? It's a question just to think about it, because it's even difficult to imagine, but we can be we have something in common. So, of course, situation in Ukraine is, of course, tragic. But I still hope that Ukrainians will fight for their independence and will win. But at the same time, Russian invasion to Ukraine is not it's just one of the many involving conflicts and crises in the OSCE region. More than a year has passed since cessation of hostilities in Nagorno-Karabakh. Although amid continued border skirmishes, true peace is not be achieved. Within the OSCE, the Minsk group has worked diligently to facilitate direct dialogue between Armenians and Azerbaijan and encourage a comprehensive conflict resolution. With the support of the previous Swedish and incumbent Polish chairmanships. While we must commend the joint talks held throughout the autumn of 2021, it must be noted with regret, but no similar meetings was able to occur under the auspices of co-chairs of last year's 28th Ministerial Council. Significant advancement on critical matters related to displacement, detainees, demining, and the protection of historic and cultural sites is still outstanding. Within the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly must call on both sides to work together to settle disputes regarding the demarcation of a border and restoration of economic and transport links, and to desist from any further antagonistic incitement that would hinder such cooperation. I express my full support to the Special Representative on South Caucasus, Carrie Hendrickson, in this endeavor. Meanwhile, in a demonstration of the value of existing OSCE mechanisms, the participants in the Geneva International Discussion held several rounds of talks over the past couple of months, seeking to address outstanding within Russia-Georgia conflict and to resolve the most pressing concerns of conflict-affected populations in Georgia's regions of Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region. This allowed effective exchange on health measures amid the COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions on freedom of movement, but unfortunately still failed to resolve disagreements about the flight of refugees and internally displaced persons. One of the key obstacles for resolution of the conflict is that Russia continues neglecting being a party of this conflict, as well as continues to strengthen its military presence on the occupied parts of Georgia and to deepen de facto integration of these Georgian regions into Russia. And this must be reversed. When it comes to the Transnistrian conflict, attempts at conflict resolution within the format 5+2 format have stalled. At the 28th Ministerial Council, in their statements on the negotiations on the Transnistrian settlement process, dignitaries once again expressed their strong support for ongoing mediation efforts, but any such meeting under the Swedish chairmanship was still not possible, despite strong diplomatic engagement. Russia's political and economic pressure on pro-European and pro-reformist government in Chisinau, including by means of energy blackmailing, also played an important negative part in this. So, ladies and gentlemen, fellow parliamentarians, we as the chosen representatives of our peoples cannot consider the above development in abstraction. Rather, the suffering of our people resulting from such a resurgence of animosities and authoritarianism is a concrete reality, what we must face and tackle it. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, as a unique platform for inter-parliamentary dialogue, can complement traditional diplomatic channels in averting future crises by giving a voice to the marginalized and oppressed. As parliamentarians who stand for all segments of society, it falls upon us to oversee our government's adherence to the spirit of inclusivity, democracy, and security as enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act and Charter of Paris. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Lorenas, for sharing your views, and also thank you for hosting the CODEL from the United States. We had a terrific visit in Lithuania, and on our way to this meeting. So thank you for your hospitality and thank you for sharing those views. We look forward to seeing your report at the annual meeting. Dear colleagues, we still may interrupt our debate at some point to hear from the ambassador, but I'm going to continue to move forward on our agenda. We now move to agenda item 8, open general debate. So let us now open our general debate on the topic of heightened tensions in the OSCE area and the need for inter-parliamentary dialogue. We look forward to hearing your views. I can see that a large number of committee members have asked to speak, and we have only a limited amount of time here today. So again, I would just remind everyone that we have a 2-minute limit. I would ask you to please stay within those limits out of respect to your fellow colleagues who wish to also intervene. As has become the tradition for me with the committee, I'd like to start general debate by recognizing our vice chair, Mr. Kostel-Dunava. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, dear Mr. Hudson, for giving me the word and for the excellent cooperation you provided within our committee bureau. My deep appreciations for Mr. Kaciunas' detailed presentation that covered the most important challenges our region is facing today. And my gratitude goes towards our colleagues from the governmental side of OSCE and HCNM for their insightful presentations. Dear colleagues, today conflict became an obsolete word. It turns into war. Despite international community's previous warnings and requests to refrain from the use of force, we have evident gross violations of the Russian Federation of many international agreements, including the Helsinki Final Act. I may say that even before the Russian military large-scale attack, we witnessed an unprecedented political adversity within the OSCE region since the end of the Cold War. This continuation of the military aggression of Ukraine might not only have a devastating impact on the citizens of the entire OSCE region, but also spread the situation in Europe beyond Ukraine. However, the war in Ukraine should not overshadow other threats to our common security, both within and outside the OSCE region. That's why, firstly, all of us should press for even more committed inter-parliamentary dialogue and action. Then, I would remind you that OSCE is the core platform for cooperation in the field of security between East and West. We must call on our governments to make full use of all its existing mechanisms. Conflict prevention and resolution are the core mandate of the OSCE. For my country, Romania, it remains of paramount importance to have sustainable negotiated political solutions of the protracted conflicts around the Black Sea region, reached within the internationally agreed formats, based on the principles and norms of the international law and human rights law. Allow me to add that Romania values very much the 3 pillars of the European security: the CFE Treaty, the Treaty on Open Skies, and the Vienna document remain solid pillars of our security architecture, which together with other relevant mechanisms on CSBM continue to represent the core of our common approach to security in the area of arms control. Distinguished colleagues, I thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from each of you during this debate.
Thank you so much. We will now recognize from Canada, Ms. Hetty Fry. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a few questions, but I was going to ask some of them to Ambassador Kinnear, but she's not there. But there are some things I want to talk about with regard to security. We see what is happening in Ukraine right now. And I just wondered whether or not those who are discussing security have paid attention to what could happen in the Arctic. The Arctic is an important part of, or many of our countries are bordering the Arctic. And I think, you know, given that there are armed warships by Russia up in the Arctic, I think we need to consider what we do about that, because we've been looking at land borders a lot and we have not been looking at that very important Northern Passage. And so I wondered if somebody wanted to comment on that.
I think if you'll go ahead and use your time, and then we'll respond to your questions.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We will now move to the representative from Finland, Ms. Pia Kalma. You have the floor. We will now recognize for the United States, Senator Roger Wicker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues, Europe is at war at this very moment. The lives of tens of thousands of young Europeans hang in the balance at this very moment because of the delusional dictatorship currently in control in Russia, and because of his brazen attack. The free world deserves better than this modern day Adolf Hitler. If Vladimir Putin's recent words and deeds have a haunting familiarity, it is because they are directly out of that Nazi madman's notebook. I mean, no offense to the Russian delegates to this assembly. In effect, they have no alternative but to parrot the Putin line. If they took a position to the contrary, they would, upon returning to Moscow, meet a fate similar to those of Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Boris Nemtsov, Sergei Magnitsky, and Alexei Navalny. I join the virtual unanimous denunciation by my OSCE colleagues of this outrage, of this trampling of 7 decades of a rules-based world order. But I must use the few seconds I have today to sound a warning to the defensive military alliance to which most of us belong. If Vladimir Putin succeeds in Ukraine, he will not stop there, just as he did not stop with Transnistria, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Crimea, and the Donbass. How can any of us realistically believe he will stop with Ukraine? According to Putin's twisted rationale, every former republic of the USSR is at risk. NATO is at risk. Every member of the peace-loving international community is at risk of being swept up into this conflict. And my colleagues, we are not ready. Our collective military capability is not sufficient to deter the aggression that this Russian dictator is likely to pursue. I will, in the coming hours and days, try to persuade my president, President Biden, and the House and Senate to enact a supplemental defense appropriation bill. I give the same warning to NATO. It is time for my government and the governments of all nations to rethink our priorities and to reorder the military capability of our alliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. I'll now recognize from Azerbaijan, Mr. Azay Guliev.
Thank you very much, dear Chair, dear Richard Hudson. I am one of the parliamentarians who believes in a meaningful inter-parliamentary dialogue for adequately addressing the issues of common concern. It is particularly true for potential inter-parliamentary dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan delegations to help their reconciliation and the normalization of interstate relationships in post-conflict stage. As you know, so far, both countries have signed 3 significant statements putting an end to 30-year-long conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Now, former conflicting sides have been engaged within the different formats of negotiations to bring irreversible peace to our region. In this regard, I would like to appreciate the initiative put forward by France and EU to bring Armenia and Azerbaijan for the solutions of the commitments under the signed trilateral statements. Dear colleagues, these are the issues that could be a subject for inter-parliamentary dialogue. First, the receiving correct and accurate versions of mind maps from Armenia to Azerbaijan. The obtaining the information about 3,890 missing Azerbaijanis during the first Armenia-Azerbaijan war. Third, discussing issues raised regarding the reopening and the establishing of communications and transportation links, including land access from western part of Azerbaijan to its autonomous Republic of Nakhchivan through the Zangezur corridor. Four, withdraw all its remaining illegal armed detachments from the territories where Russian peacekeepers are temporarily deployed. Fifth, on the delimitation and the demarcation of the state border between two states. Finally, signing a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan based on the mutual respect of each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of internationally recognized borders. I do hope that these topics also would be supported from Armenian side, and I think Azerbaijan delegation is ready for the meaningful dialogue with Armenian part, and in order to bring a lasting and irreversible peace and security to our region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now recognize from Cyprus, Ms. Irene Karalambidis.
Thank you, Mr. President. This afternoon, the House of Representatives of the Republic of Cyprus has unanimously adopted a resolution which reaffirms its full support for the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. The resolution condemns any form of unilateral action that supports the cessation, recognition, and/or annexation of secessionist entities, stresses the urgent need to return to dialogue within the framework of the Minsk agreements, encourages additional diplomatic initiatives that could lead to the de-escalation of tensions and the peaceful settlement of the crisis in Ukraine. Stresses the importance of a united, consistent, and decisive response by the international community to blatant violations of international law and human rights against sovereign states and their peoples in every case, and reaffirms its readiness to assist in the context of our parliamentary diplomacy, international efforts to return to negotiations with the aim of restoring stability, lasting peace and security in Ukraine, and consequently in Europe. My dearest colleagues, one of the majors, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful army of the world, unleashed an attack against a small country, a small but brave one. Our colleagues, as has been said before, are defending their country at this moment as we speak. People are getting killed, women, children. In a war, there are always casualties. Honestly, I cannot understand this war. It's beyond my logic. My thoughts are with all the mothers who said goodbye and sent their sons to fight, to all the wives who said goodbyes to their husbands, and to all the children who had to say goodbye to their fathers. Let's all together unite our voices against this irrationality of Russia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now recognize from Ukraine, Ms. Mikita Potyrailev.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You heard me today several times. I just only want to update some information about war crimes that are made by Russian occupants in Ukraine. More than 5 children were killed in actions, at least. We don't have final figures in different Ukrainian cities and towns, far from front line, in center of Ukraine, by Russian rockets. Couple of hours ago, Russia bombed hospital in one of Ukrainian cities. At least 4 people were killed and 10 were severely wounded. I would like to stress that it wasn't just by case that Russian dictator didn't want to call this war. And his so-called deputies, not elected by, but appointed politicians, selected politicians, today repeated us that it's an operation. Why? Because they want to proceed unconventional war. Unconventional war. This is what they're doing. No rules, no obligations, murders, crimes, killings. This is what is happening, my colleagues. It was a short update of what is happening in Ukraine now.
Thank you for that update. Now recognize from the United Kingdom, Mr. John Whittingdale. He's not here. I will then recognize from Armenia, Mr. Edward Agajanyan.
Yeah, no, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. I believe that the speech of my colleague from Azerbaijan once again confirmed all of the arguments without an exception of the speech that I had today during the joint session. But trying to transmit this dialogue into a more constructive phase, I would like to say the following. The current debate is dedicated to discussing the need for inter-parliamentary dialogue at times of heightened tensions in the OSCE area. And indeed, parliamentarians do have the extra freedom for a more flexible, transparent, and direct dialogue than do our counterparts who represent the executive branch. And in this context, I believe that the role of parliamentarians on the road of building sustainable peace is at the grassroots level. Namely, among other functions, inter-parliamentary dialogue should facilitate and help establish a dialogue between the societies of conflicting countries. And on the road of building mutual trust, it is of utmost importance, first and foremost, to stop and eliminate any form of xenophobia and hate speech among both societies. Unfortunately, in the case of Azerbaijan, before referring to the societies, we must firstly address the issue of xenophobia and hate speech on the state level. Here are a few of the examples of such behavior by the president of Azerbaijan. Referring to Armenians, the latter says, they have neither conscience, neither morality. They don't even have a brain. Or, for 30 years, this land has been in the hands of wild beasts, in the hands of predators, in the hands of jackals. One could argue that the climax of state-level Azeri xenophobia was the so-called trophy park in the center of Baku, where, amongst other things, humiliating mannequins of Armenian soldiers were illustrated as means of entertainment for the visitors. By the way, the mannequins were later removed to avoid a more strict interim measure carried out by the International Court of Justice. Nonetheless, the International Court of Justice did carry out an interim measure where, amongst other measures, it stated that Azerbaijan must take all necessary measures to prevent the incitement and promotion of racial hatred and discrimination, including by its officials and public institutions, targeted at persons of Armenian national or ethnic origin. Dear colleagues, having said that the inter-parliamentary dialogue is of great importance in facilitating inter-societal dialogue, I believe that first of all, we should eliminate state-level xenophobia and hate speech. Otherwise, there is and will be no room for inter-parliamentary dialogue. Hence, I urge our Azerbaijani colleagues to stop this behavior if we are honest about our desire to reach a long-lasting peace in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now recognize from Belarus, Andrei Savinik. You have the floor.
Okay, dear colleagues, I hope that even in difficult times, we should not forget about the thematic topics of our inter-parliamentary dialogue, which contain a lot of important issues. In that respect, I would like to say that the delegation of the National Assembly of Belarus intends to continue its work on resolution, drug use prevention among children and youth. We want to draw your attention to the relevance of the topic. The spread of drug addiction continues to be one of the most pressing social problems in the world. Drug abuse among young people is particularly tragic. The average age of initiation into drugs today is 13 years old. The fight against drug abuse among children and young people is a big challenge, which can only be met together. Prevention is the best way to fight drug addiction. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has never considered the relationship between drug prevention and youth. We therefore believe that it is absolutely right to strengthen the relevant aspirations of the OSCE and its participating state through a corresponding thematic resolution. We remain very motivated to continue our work on this topic. We hope that parliamentarians will support the Belarusian initiative, and we invite our distinguished colleagues to co-sponsor the draft resolution. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We'll now recognize the representative from Turkey, Mr. Salami Altinak.
Değerli Başkan, Rusya Federasyonu Silahlı Kuvvetleri tarafından Ukrayna'ya yönelik olarak başlatılan askeri operasyonu kabul edilemez buluyoruz ve reddediyoruz.
Distinguished Chairperson, we consider the military operation launched by the armed forces of the Russian Federation against Ukraine unacceptable and we reject it.
Bu saldırı Minsk mutabakatlarını ortadan kaldırmanın ötesinde uluslararası hukukun ağır bir ihlalidir. Bölgemizin ve dünyanın güvenliğine ciddi bir tehdit teşkil etmektedir.
This attack, beyond destroying the Minsk agreement, is a grave violation of international law and poses a serious threat to the security of the region and the world.
Ülkelerin toprak bütünlükleri ve egemenliklerine saygı duyulması gerektiğine inanan Türkiye, sınırların silah yoluyla değiştirilmesine karşıdır.
Believing in the necessity to respect the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of countries, Turkey is against changing of borders by use of arms.
Rusya Federasyonu'nu da bu haksız ve hukuksuz eylemi bir an önce durdurmaya çağırıyoruz.
We call on the Russian Federation to immediately stop this unjust and unlawful act.
Ukrayna'nın siyasi birliği, egemenliği ve toprak bütünlüğüne desteğimiz bundan sonra da devam edecektir.
Our support for the political unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine will continue.
AGİT istişare süreçlerini daha güçlendirmek için önemli bir platformdur. Keza Azerbaycan'ın dönem başkanlığında sürdürülen AGİT Güvenlik İşbirliği Forumu'nda da oturumlara etkin ve yapıcı katkı sağlıyoruz. Azerbaycan Büyükelçisi Rovşan Sadık Baylı'yı başarılı çalışmalar için de kutluyorum.
The OSCE is an important platform to further strengthen the consultation process. Likewise, we make an effective and constructive contribution to the sessions. I would like to congratulate the Ambassador of Azerbaijan, Rovshan Sadıkbaylı, for his successful work.
AGİT, Ukrayna Özel Gözlem Misyonu'nun Ukrayna'daki varlığı sahadaki gerçeklerin nesnel bir şekilde takibi açısından gereklidir. Bu vesileyle Özel Gözlem Misyonu'nun Başkanı Büyükelçi Halit Çevik'e ve Özel Gözlem Misyonu gözlemcilerine de desteğimizi yenilemek istiyorum.
The presence of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine is essential for objective monitoring of the realities on the ground. On this occasion, we would like to reiterate our support to SMM to Ukraine, Chief Monitor, Ambassador Halit Çevik and SMM monitors.
Son olarak Türkiye, Kırım'ın yasa dışı ve gayrimeşru ilhakını da tanımamaktadır. Türkiye'de milyonlarca Kırım Tatar asıllı vatandaşımız bulunmaktadır. Arzumuz Yarımada'daki Kırım Tatarlarının güvenliğinin ve refahının da sağlanmasıdır. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Finally, Turkey does not recognize the illegal and illegitimate annexation of Crimea. There are millions of citizens of Crimean Tatar origin in Turkey. Our desire is to ensure the safety and well-being of the Crimean Tatars on the peninsula. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we've now been joined by Ambassador Jocelyn Kinnear, Chair of the Security Committee of the OSCE Permanent Council and a permanent representative of Canada to the OSCE. Understand that you are prioritizing a number of issues we also face on, including cybersecurity, countering terrorism, and radicalization, as well as critical infrastructure protection. Ambassador, thank you for making time to be with us today. You have the floor. Push that button.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and my apologies for the slight upheaval or disordering of your schedule. Of course, today is a day that is not unrolling the way any of us had hoped or planned. I am very grateful for the opportunity to brief the Parliamentary Assembly as the 2022 chair of the Security Committee, supporting the Polish chairpersonship in office. The mandate of the Security Committee is to strengthen the OSCE in the field of non-military and political aspects of security, as you know. What I am presenting to you now here is how Canada envisaged its chairpersonship of the Security Committee prior to Russia's military aggression against Ukraine this morning. It is difficult to assess, if I'm being perfectly frank with you, how the current crisis will impact the work of the organization and the work of the Security Committee within the organization. What I can say for sure is that the security challenges faced by the OSCE region are systematically compounded by crisis and by instability. The COVID pandemic has had an impact. One can only imagine what the impact of the current crisis will be. It will be more important than ever in the wake of this invasion and attack to strengthen our collective capacity to deal with these security challenges. We want the Security Committee to remain a forum for substantive and informative discussion. And so I will present to you what we have, what we had envisioned for this year, and we hope to be able to continue with, at least to some degree. So with a view to making the Security Committee a forum for substantive and interactive and informative discussion, we'll be inviting a wide range of speakers, including from civil society, NGOs, academia, the private sector, and of course the OSCE field missions. We'll continue to ensure a balance between states, balance of many geographical regions, as well as a gender balance with regard to our speakers. And of course, we'll be coming to all of your participating states, looking for input and contributions to that speaker list. It is clear that diversity is important to most participating states, and so gender mainstreaming, inclusive participation, and the role of youth will be woven into all of our, all throughout our program. This is not just the right approach for us to take, it is also the smart approach, because it will help us to ensure that our committee delivers on its potential by drawing on as many different perspectives and experiences as possible. In my experience, that's the best way to come up with the strongest way forward. We will examine the core Security Committee thematic areas of cybersecurity, counterterrorism, transnational organized crime, borders, and law enforcement. The Polish chairpersonship in office has highlighted cybersecurity in particular as a priority for their chairpersonship. And the last 2 years have clearly underscored just how pervasive cybersecurity has become in our lives. From the cybersecurity lens, we will first look at education to raise awareness of cyber threats. That meeting was intended to have taken place this coming Monday, but we have postponed it for the time being in light of today's events. And then we hope to hold a second meeting later in the year, turning our attention to capacity building and resilience in the protection of our critical infrastructure from a cyber perspective. Noting the CIO's, the chairperson in office's emphasis on youth, we will also look at the connections between youth, cyber, and radicalization. Trafficking also remains a blight on our societies, and we will explore the new and innovative approaches in countering and addressing cross-border trafficking. And sadly, the threats from terrorism and violent extremism appear to be undiminished. Indeed, the upheavals caused by the pandemic have added fuel to the poisonous narratives of terrorist and extremist groups and presented them with new avenues to exploit. Transnational organized crime has taken advantage of the same opportunities to prey on the most vulnerable and to profit from the global crisis. In our program, we will look at both the challenges and the good practices that we should consider when tackling these threats, such as in combating illicit financial flows and preventing and countering violent extremism and radicalization leading to terrorism in the digital era. Border management and security is a key interest of the OSCE. We will seek perspectives from Central Asia on this issue, drawing on the wealth of experience and expertise available at the OSCE Border Management College, Staff College in Dushanbe, Tajikistan. And then later in the year, we will look at corruption from the security lens, its relationship to transnational organized crime and opportunities we may have to counter and prevent corruption. And transnational organized crime. We face a number of thorny issues here in the OSCE region, as is apparent to us all. And the Security Committee will not shy away from these. Rather, we will discuss them as they arise in a calm and non-politicized manner. Although we will always seek to find consensus, which is of course one of the OSCE's paramount guiding principles, there may be some areas where we can only agree to disagree and move on. And then we would move on to areas where we can make real progress. As parallel discussions will be taking place within the Parliamentary Assembly General Committee on Political Affairs and Security Committee here, I look forward to the exchange of ideas that we may have. We will aim to make the work of our committees complementary. The OSCE will need to pull together all its resources to face today's security challenges, and the Security Committee will do its utmost to contribute to our common goals of comprehensive security. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to answer any questions should you have them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I think you're right that we're all going to need to pull together during these very challenging times, and we stand ready to work very closely with you. So thank you for your work. Thank you for making time to be with us today. We will move back to our speakers list. Next from Sweden, I have Bjorn Soder. You have the floor. I'm sorry, Bjorn, we're not able to hear you. Can't hear him.
Maybe we'll move to the next speaker and we'll try to solve.
Bjorn, if you don't mind, I may move to the next speaker and then try to come back to you. Hopefully we can figure out this technical. I apologize. Next on our list from the United States, Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. President Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is Jewish, and he is fighting for Ukraine's freedom now. I hold in my hand a map that shows the jeopardy and trouble that is now being perpetrated to many of our friends and allies. I am not Jewish, but I'm outraged by Putin's discredited rationale for this illegal war. I'm an American, and in the United States, there are Jewish Americans, Ukrainian Americans, African Americans, and others with ancestry from all over the world. And we see Putin's cold-blooded aggression for what it is. How dare Putin claim he is fighting Nazism when he is wearing the evil hat of Nazism himself as he seeks to conquer innocent people. Vladimir Putin has solely rendered a violent injustice on Ukraine and its innocent people. He has also rendered a violent injustice against the world and against the innocent people of the world. Putin with his stormtroopers have marched into Ukraine like the senseless, purposeless, immoral wars of medieval times. This war and violent attack today in 2022 is purposeless, immoral, and senseless. Russia should stand down and join the civilized world at the peace table. In the meantime, all defensive actions should be now rendered, including stopping all airline traffic in and out of Russia. I applaud President Biden, our NATO allies, and all freedom-loving nations for their unity and resolve against Russia's brutality. I still call for peace and diplomacy. We gather in the face of great peril. Putin has launched an illegal, unprovoked, and vicious large-scale invasion on Ukraine under the thinly disguised fiction of a humanitarian intervention. This is a violent act of aggression against Ukraine, Europe, and the world. Vladimir Putin has violated Russia's obligations under the UN Charter, the Helsinki Final Act, and shredded the Minsk ceasefire accords. His actions confirm his place in history as a crazed tyrant and war criminal. Putin's warmongering is not just a geopolitical challenge, but a humanitarian catastrophe upon civilians and innocents. Putin's disastrous war will kill thousands and threaten millions more in Ukraine, but also throughout Europe. Sadly, families, including women and children, and those that defend them are now dying as I speak here today. Many of Russia's neighbors know the Kremlin's aggression all too well. In addition to its war of Ukraine, Putin has used a similarly cynical playbook in Georgia and Moldova, where he also backs proxy movements and illegally positioned his troops. We must also not be distracted from the fact that Russia's aggression also includes Belarus. Only 2 days ago, I met with the opposition leader and other dissidents who had to flee their own country, now live in Lithuania, where they continue their courageous fight for Belarus freedom. I'm heartbroken to see Lukashenko sell out his country's sovereignty by the Kremlin's domination. Ukraine is Putin and Russia's latest target. As many Russians already know, Putin's violent tyranny is often first imposed upon those he claims as compatriots and friends, but I have faith in the courage and determination of our Ukrainian friends, and that their proud nation will persist free and democratic, and their freedom will remain strong and permanent. Finally, this time of uncertainty also allows for moral clarity that all of us must have. This committee must stand against Putin's aggression and the establishment of a new Iron Curtain over Europe. We can do this together. I invite my colleagues to condemn Putin's recklessly murderous foreign policy and stand united with the people of Ukraine, as well as Belarus in this dark moment. I will, as a member of the House of Representatives, offer a resolution denouncing this war. Freedom yesterday, freedom today, and freedom tomorrow. Glory to Ukraine. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
Thank you very much. I think we'll try to go back to Bjorn Sauter and see if we've worked out the technical difficulties.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, we are now living in a time where there is a great risk that diplomacy and the founding acts of this assembly may be sidelined. The developments in Ukraine and the security crisis in Europe has led to the questioning of the very foundations of the OSCE. I would like to take the opportunity to recall these foundations and the importance of them in shaping a common future in Europe. More than 40 years ago, delegates assembled in Europe to create rules and guidelines for securing the peace on our continent. By the time of the 1970s, there had been many serious crises. However, after the signing of the Helsinki Final Act, there was a framework for solving these crises, and it proved to be a success. Although, of course, more security challenges were to come, we had fundament to build trust and cooperation on our continent. After the end of the Cold War, the cooperation and the hopes for a secure future were brighter than at any time since the Second World War. However, today, and since the 2010s, we have seen an ever deteriorating security situation that now has turned into an immediate crisis and full-scale war on the European continent. Today, the Helsinki Final Act is violated and the European security order has been attacked by Russia and Putin. We must all condemn these actions and make our strongest efforts to support Ukraine. The world must now respond in a united and a decisive way. What Ukraine needs to withstand aggression must be our highest priority. With these actions, Putin has taken a path which will lead to an abyss, also for the Russian people who will suffer. For our organization, it's important to, even in this situation, see the future and keep the diplomacy working. That's why it's so important that this assembly continue to meet and discuss items of common interest. the only way back from an escalatory situation is the way that involves diplomacy, and diplomacy in many ways, both between diplomats, governments, and elected parliamentarians. Therefore, in this time of crisis, I would like to call on you all to take note of the historic success of this organization and the other means of cooperation in Europe and look for diplomatic solutions. I'm sure it can be handled if all participating states of the OSCE have a good will and continue to give diplomacy a chance. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'll now recognize from Poland, Radoslaw Foyel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Congresswoman, for your words. I think we can all agree there isn't a more important topic today than the barbaric Russian aggression against Ukraine. I want to start with expressing my solidarity with the Ukrainian nation. As their national anthem says, "Ще не вмерла Україна." First, the decision of the Russian Federation to recognize certain areas of Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts as independent entities, and then moving its military within Ukrainian borders is a flagrant breach of the fundamental principles of international law. During today's Parliament General Session here in Warsaw, Polish lawmakers unanimously adopted a resolution condemning Russia's aggression and calling for sanctions. I want to appeal to all of you here to do the same and to encourage your respective governments to take bold and quick actions, as such deeds cannot go unpunished. Russia, Putin's Russia, should be isolated from the international community. We have to stand together for free and independent Ukraine, and I strongly believe that will be the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now recognize from San Marino, Oscar Mina.
Grazie Presidente. L'Assemblea parlamentare dell'Osce rimane un organismo fondamentale per la facilitazione dei negoziati in ambito di conflitto, come in questo momento drammatico in Ucraina.
The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly remains a fundamental body for the facilitation of negotiations, especially in this dramatic moment in Ukraine.
Dunque non è in discussione il metodo nella ricerca del dialogo che l'OSCE ha sempre ribadito e adottato in maniera multilaterale.
So we're not discussing the method in the search for a dialogue within the OSCE, which is something that the OSCE is always found in a multilateral component.
E meno che meno siamo di fronte ad una sua difficoltà nell'affrontare questa crisi in questo consesso, ma al contrario.
But even less we are in front of its challenges in dealing with these difficulties in this moment.
L'Assemblea parlamentare dell'OSCE resta una risorsa preziosa per la cooperazione di sicurezza e per la stabilizzazione dei conflitti in genere, su cui fanno affidamento tutti gli stati di questa regione e non solo i principali attori.
And the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly remains a very precious tool for cooperation and the stabilization of conflicts in this region. And on this body, all the countries of the OSCE are putting their hopes on.
L'Assemblea parlamentare dell'OSCE offre da sempre un foro di dialogo che resta unico ed è il suo approccio equilibrato, multilaterale ed onnicomprensivo della indivisibilità della sicurezza e della pari dignità nel garantire la sicurezza all'interno degli stati stessi, declinando in termini di tutela di diritti umani.
The OSCE has always been a forum for dialogue, and it remains unique in its balanced and multilateral and comprehensive approach, and in the indivisibility of security, and the same dignity in granting the security within states and between states, and also to safeguard human rights.
L'opera dell'Assemblea parlamentare è un lento, laborioso esercizio strategico di costruzione della fiducia tra i Paesi membri ed è ancora più necessario in questa fase di polarizzazione e diffidenza sui temi della sicurezza per la risoluzione di questo conflitto in Ucraina.
The work of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly is very important and strategic in building trust between countries, and it's even more necessary in this moment of polarization on the issues of security and in the solution of this conflict in Ukraine.
Grazie Presidente, grazie Segretario che mi ha fatto da interprete.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary General, for being interpreter. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was an excellent intervention despite the interpreter. It was an amateur at best. Thank you.
Should I seek for another job? Just keep me. Thank you.
Okay, next from Ukraine, I'll recognize Nestor Shufrich. Okay, maybe we'll come back to Nestor. So from Azerbaijan, Tural Ganjaliev. I apologize for mispronouncing that name.
Dear Mr. Chairperson, dear colleagues, thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to say that despite of the situation, dramatic security situation that developing in European continent, we are seeing the attempt of the Armenian delegation to use, or I would say to misuse, the platform of the OSCE to spread lies and to mislead the international community, which is unacceptable. Dear colleagues, I would like to say that today, Azerbaijanophobia, the hate speech, xenophobia continues to be widespread in Armenian public and being promoted by the public and political figures, regardless of their political affiliation. 2 years ago, Armenian Prime Minister signed trilateral statement ending the war, ending the occupation. We have ended the occupation of Azerbaijani lands and liberated our territories. But today we are seeing the delegation from the Armenian member speaking and baseless, putting forward baseless regards against Azerbaijan. Of course, we have to condemn this approach, and I would like to also say that Azerbaijanophobia and xenophobia is being fed to such level that after today we will commemorate the 30th year of the Khojaly genocide, which was the biggest genocide in the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And of course, we have to understand that the future lies only with the peaceful coexistence of two nations and neighborly relations between our peoples. So that's why it's very important to establish just and durable peace. But unfortunately, again, we must understand that after the ending of the war, we have to focus our attention in order to build up on the principles, on the core principles that the OSCE is standing for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will now go to representative from Ukraine, Mr. Nemiria. Okay, we'll come back from Armenia. Ms. Grigorian, you're recognized.
Dear colleagues, today we're deeply concerned with the developments in Ukraine. We very much hope for a soon resolution of the situation via the political and diplomatic means. The OSCE parliamentary dimension, despite numerous setbacks and challenges, continues to remain an important platform for dialogue and political debate. We proceed from the understanding that in democratic societies, parliamentarians represent the interest and the will of their constituents, provided that they have been elected through free and fair elections. Devoted to democracy and strengthening the democratic culture in Armenia, we have committed to opening an era of peace in our region, the South Caucasus. Just today, the special representatives of Armenia and Turkey had their second meeting aimed at full normalization between Armenia and Turkey, reiterating their agreement to continue the process without preconditions. We believe that through trust, we can build grounds for mutual understanding, and for creating this trust, our words and actions should correspond to each other. While Azerbaijan is speaking about Khojaly genocide, in just 3 days, we're commemorating the genocide in Baku and in Sumgait. And speaking about being constructive, at the same time, it does the contrary by sending a message to the world openly stating that use of force to resolve conflicts should be acceptable, that attacking Nagorno-Karabakh in fall 2020 has ended the conflict, whereas the international community through the OSCE Minsk group continuously repeats that the conflict is not over and a lasting resolution should be possible only via a political dialogue under the auspices of the OSCE Minsk group. Moreover, instead of putting efforts to build trust, Azerbaijan continues to illegally the illegal detention of Armenian prisoners of war and civilian captives. Dear colleagues, unfortunately, the security architecture of the OSCE has been undermined seriously in fall 2020, when we failed to react effectively to the use of force by Azerbaijan to resolve the conflict. We once again hope for a soon political resolution of the ongoing situation in Ukraine and hope that our parliamentary dialogue will also play its role. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now recognize from the United Kingdom, Nick Smith.
Thank you, Chair and colleagues. First of all, solidarity with the people of the Ukraine on this dark day, and solidarity also with their neighbors of the Russian Federation. They will be deeply troubled by Moscow's use of lethal force this morning. I want to condemn the actions of President Putin. This unprovoked escalation into war is an outrage. It is an attack against us all. I support the Ukrainian Defense Forces and hope they stop the Russian tanks in their tracks. And I feel for the Russian people who oppose Putin's actions and the parents of Russian soldiers needlessly dragged into war. The work undertaken by the OSCE's Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine is to be applauded, relaying accurate and detailed information on Russian violations has been essential to the international response. If possible, this crucial on-the-ground monitoring continues as one of the few ways the truth will come out. Our OSCE Assembly for Parliamentarians must work together. We need an open dialogue about the dirty money swirling around our economies. This invasion must mark a turning point. Here in London, we must speedily improve the powers of our regulators and the police to follow the dirty money. Billions run through our financial and property markets. We must find better ways to understand this financial chicanery. We must use all of our economic power to protect our democracies. As parliamentarians, to support de-escalation, we must undermine Putin's pirate regime and the kleptocrats around him. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now recognize from the Netherlands, Arda Gurkens.
Thank you very much, Chair. Today, many words already have been said on the gruesome attack of Russia on the people on Ukraine. This attack is absolutely a violation of international law. I must say there is no possible sane reason to inflict this harm and misery to people in despair right now, people in fear. There's also no possible sane reason to invade a country and silence their democratic elected members. There's no possible sane reason to even think that these actions would be rightful, legal, and justified in any way. I would hope that we all will unite in condemnation of these acts, and also want to ask the committee to reflect on the position of OBSE and how we can play a role in the peaceful negotiations here. My thoughts go out to all people in Ukraine. In my prayers, they're with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, let's go back to Mr. Nestor Šuфrić. Mr. Šuфrić, you're recognized. Also from the Ukraine, we had on our list, Mr. Nemira.
Ukraine, so I think we
Okay.
have to move.
We'll move forward then to
Luis Grazia from
Mr. Luis Grazia from Portugal. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the 21st century, any political crisis, any disagreement between countries must always be settled by diplomatic means. I never thought we lived a dark day like this, a day of terror, a day of war back in Europe. Regarding COVID, this is my first presidential presence in this committee. I'm 49 years old. I'm a son of peace. The respect for international law is and must be the rule. That's what makes us part of the civilized world. All in the framework of confidence, mutual respect, recognition of the law, and international agreements may be the way to a peaceful and proper future to all of us. We have to firmly condemn this illegal military action against Ukraine. But toward, we, Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE, must continue to work together with our governments to stop the war as soon as possible and bring this conflict back to the 21st century. Dialogue and diplomacy. In meanwhile, it's important that all democracies stand united in the security of Europe's borders, in the defense of freedom and democracy. And if it's needed, we must be together in the decision of new economic sanctions to Russian Federation. Above all, we need to focus to support and help the affected population in Ukraine. We don't know how long will be this conflict, but it's urgent to respond to humanity needs of innocent Ukrainian people, which I once more express our solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now recognize Ms. Sachs from Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, esteemed colleagues. It's an honor to be joining you on this very hard day for all of us as parliamentarians in the community of the OSCE. Canada condemns in the strongest possible terms Russia's egregious attack on Ukraine. These unprovoked actions are a clear further violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They are also in violation of Russia's obligations under international law, including in this collective forum. If we are to maintain the collective security and rules-based order among countries, we must stand together in the face of such reckless and dangerous aggression. The brazen acts of Russia not only threaten Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, its continued actions show concerted efforts to disrupt and push against the shared values of democracy and rule of law that are the foundations of stable civil societies and the protection of individual and state freedoms of safety and security that our constituents from across our 57 countries ask us to uphold and protect each and every day. Without an unwavering commitment to these principles of rules-based order and collective security of our freedoms, a future can be thrown into spillover and uncertainty, impacting our youth and deteriorating trust in our institutions, including this one. On a more personal perspective, I am shocked at Russia's assertions that its actions are in the name of denazification of Ukraine. As a Jew and a descendant of Holocaust survivors, knowing full well that the President and Prime Minister of Ukraine are Jewish, this horrifying justification of aggression is nothing short of revisionism and a distortion of history that highlights the gravity of this moment we are in. In the face of these attacks on Ukraine, Canada will take additional action to stop Russia's unwarranted aggression by working with our G7 and NATO partners. And while we continue to stand with Ukraine and its people, we must continue our work as parliamentarians here in the OSCE and within our own communities to address the roots of disinformation and rhetoric in this moment, and to stem the tides of hate and disruption to democratic principles, particularly how they foment and spread in our digital spaces. Efforts to share, support, and educate on the importance of maintaining rules-based order and fostering conflict resolution and dialogue and addressing hate, including anti-Semitism, is a security priority in our communities and across all of our borders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. I'll now recognize Mr. Janila from Finland.
Mr. Chairman, participating states are having ongoing discussions over sanctions towards Russia and its cronies in Belarus. I don't believe insufficient or half-hearted sanctions are going to make a difference this time. That is why I appeal to you, especially the member states of the European Union, to stand firm now and adopt sanctions that can make a difference. A proper and credible response needs to be vigorous. It needs to make a lasting difference. Dear colleagues, we need to put Russia out of the SWIFT payment system. That is a drastic measure and may even hurt some of the participating states, including my own. But this should not be taken lightly now. Not anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our speakers. I would like to thank Ambassador Abdurmanov for staying with us for the entire debate. We will now move to agenda item number 9, any other business. So does any member wish to raise any other business at this time? Colleagues, it's been a fruitful discussion, and I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for their contributions. I want to thank the interpreters who stepped up and volunteered to help us get through this challenging time. And I'd again like to thank the professionals from the Secretariat who worked so hard to organize these meetings. Our committee will next meet during our annual session in Birmingham in July. I now declare this meeting of the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security now closed.